I think I'll begin. Hello and welcome everyone. This is the first webinar of this year from Be Waste Wise. As most of you all know, I'm Akanksha Singh. I'm the community builder at Be Waste Wise. And a brief intro on our organization. We are a non-profit organization and we've been bridging this global waste solutions expertise gap for more than 10 years now. And if you see the value in making diverse sustainability dialogues such as these available free of charge to anyone and everyone, then we request you to please support us in our mission. We encourage you all to please check out our website and donate. We will also share the link to the donation page over the chat as well. Now, for today's topic of discussion, this panel and the session will explore how carbon pricing can be applied to waste management in ways that can cut emissions effectively while shielding citizens from undue cost. To moderate this session, we have with us Piotrek Bergzak. Most of you all would have seen Piotrek spearheading such sessions with us quite often. He's at the helm of the African Circular Foundation's Circular Economy programs, and he's developed comprehensive roadmaps and action plans that are crucial for the continent's sustainable urban development. With Piotrek, we have very distinguished panel, and I will not go into the introductions, but will welcome them. Jenik from Zero Waste Europe, Zainab from Equal Right, and Andrea from Humans. Now, before I proceed further and I hand over to Piotrek, I would like to make some mandatory announcements. This webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website as well. Please use the Q&A function for all your queries and questions to the panel, and use the chat function to share your views, your opinions, some reports, some areas of interest that you have, and for networking as well. So please use these two functions separately. Back to the panel, and over to you, Piotrek.
Thank you very much, Akanksha, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon to those of you in Asia. Good day to everyone else, and actually some colleagues also from America. So good morning. You woke up very early for this very interesting topic today that we will discuss. So the topic is carbon pricing and waste management. Some of you may know me, I'm deeply into waste management, especially into organic waste, but today we will focus on something that is also has a strong impact socially and economically, notably carbon pricing and how to make it really socially fair. Before I start, I just want to say that this panel was originally planned and actually started during COP30 in Belém last November. Some of you who may have followed that event in Belém, you know that there was a fire towards the end of the event, unfortunately, and this panel was precisely stopped sharply, and we are taking this again here with this during this webinar. So Janek, with whom I work closely here in Brussels, we are both based in Brussels, asked me kindly. So yes, we are happy and grateful to Be Waste Wise that we can continue this important discussion that shows that even we need to be resilient. Even if there are unexpected situations, we need to indeed jointly move forward, planning also how the policies are really relevant, and to avoid, those disruptions that are happening at the larger global scale. So we will talk today about carbon pricing, and particularly on waste disposal, waste incineration. How to involve how relevant carbon pricing might be for waste management to reduce the emissions from this sector without creating regressive costs and impacts on citizens, especially those most vulnerable. So we will aim to identify fair and practical and socially just policies and the options that align environmental goals with equity and waste prevention priorities. So we'll hear first from Janek, who is at Zero Waste Europe, and he brings over a decade of EU environmental policy experience, work on waste incineration, mixed waste sorting, packaging, and climate impacts of waste. Then we'll also hear from Zainab from Climate Justice and Public Policy yeah, from sorry, from Equal Rights, yes. And but we'll hear about Zainab later, and then from Andrea. First, without further ado, I would like to ask Janek to give us an overview of your recent report on including waste incineration into the EU ETS, so emission trading system, which is also a carbon pricing mechanism. So, Janek, over to you. And you have a presentation. Okay, great.
First of all, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I hope it works.
Listen, everyone, listen carefully. We'll also have a poll at the end after the 3 presentations to check your knowledge and what you've heard. Also, we will hear some opinions from you, and then we'll have a discussion. Keep your questions in the question and answer and in the chat. But now let's listen to Janek. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Piotr, and also thank you for the Be Waste Wise for allowing us to have this event, because indeed, as Piotr said, we tried to have it during the COP30 in Belém, and right after my presentation, unfortunately, the fire broke out, and so yeah, the meeting was cancelled. So I think it's a very important discussion, and I really wanted to share like what is happening in Europe, and I hope that Zainab and Andrea maybe can also talk about what is happening elsewhere. As for myself, I have been following those policies now for the last 10 years here in Brussels. So I have seen how the debate has sort of evolved from politics, but also a lot of resistance, and at the same time also growing evidence. And I just want to clarify that we are of course an NGO working on circular economy policies, and so we are looking at how carbon pricing can help us to actually improve waste management. Not just from a kind of greenhouse gas perspective. So we are very interested in how the carbon markets can help us to have actually zero waste policies. And what does it mean for waste prevention, for recycling, and for the whole value chain? So yeah, before Piotr mentioned that I will be talking about report, but I also wanted to just to say like why the waste sector, and why should we consider including the waste sector in as part of the carbon markets. And I think what is interesting here is that if you look at the figures, it looks like the waste sector is very insignificant. So in the EU, when you look at the member states reporting, we're talking about 3% of emissions coming from the waste sector, but of course we need to know why it looks so small and insignificant. It's mainly because of we are only reporting the direct emission from landfills for biological treatment and wastewater treatment, and only from waste incineration without energy recovery. So, for example, the vast majority of emissions from incinerators, which are with energy recovery, are reported under the energy sector. So these are all excluded from here. But also, more importantly, the emissions, for example, from recycling or waste prevention, they are also not accounted there. So we during the one of the COPs, so that was, we did a report in Paris. So that was in 2015. Actually, that was the year I joined Zero Waste Europe. We published a report where we found that the real mitigation potential is much bigger. So it's not 3%. It's actually quite significant. We're talking about extra 150 to 200 million tons of CO2 savings. So if we included also the other benefits, so this is why the sector is important, and it's important to keep in mind that we should not look at only from this very limited perspective of measuring just what happens from landfills and incinerators. Otherwise, we miss out all of those important points. So what about then, the waste and the carbon markets, and why now? I started by saying that I have been working for roughly now for 10 years, and I started to work on in Europe. We have something called the effort sharing regulation. So basically, it's for the sectors which are not covered by the European emission trading scheme. So it's the transport, agriculture, and the waste sector. And I have been always very frustrated about it because it does not set any specific target for any of the sectors. So it has sort of like a overall goal to reduce from all these sectors. So the waste sector has been actually very little incentive for doing something about the waste sector. And at the same time, what is happening is that in many countries, let's call them progressive countries, such as, for example, Sweden, Denmark, also Norway, Germany, Netherlands, and also UK, have already established a carbon price on many of the activities, particularly on the waste incineration. So technically, we have half of the waste incinerators already included by the European with the carbon pricing mechanism. So it's also a matter of now to look at it how we could have a European framework for regulating the sector, because otherwise what is happening is that clearly the countries that are doing more are paying the price, while the countries who are not doing anything about it, they have the advantage, sort of like for not doing anything. Yeah. And I think it's also important to say that we are seeing that without addressing the emissions from the waste sector, and particularly from waste incineration, many countries, and for example, the case of Sweden or city of Oslo, they have realized that they cannot achieve the climate neutrality targets. So because the waste incineration is often one of the largest emitters when it comes to emissions. So that's important to keep in mind. So now quickly, so what is happening at the EU level? So in 2022, the European emission trading scheme was reviewed, and there was a lot of obviously there's a lot of lobbying around it, advocacy back and forward. Shall we include it? What shall we include it? But in the end, there was a political agreement between the European Parliament and the member states, so it's the Council, that the European Commission should study how to include incinerators. And so the first aspect of that was that they should start monitoring the emissions. And the reason is that when you look at the studies or emissions from incinerators, the figures, they vary a lot. So there is no one clear place where to look at what are the actual emissions from incinerators. And this is because for a long time, emissions have been sort of calculated rather than really measured. But the measuring part is starting to happen now. So, and the second step is actually this year in July. So by end of July, the Commission needs to present the kind of impact assessment together with a proposal on how to include incinerators in the ETS. And actually inclusion would happen in 2028. So it would give member states some time to actually to include them. There was also option for those countries who really resist to opt out for until 2030. And another point is that, of course, there's a question on how the inclusion of incinerators would impact other waste management activities. And one of the things that the Commission also needs to study is how to include, for example, landfills, because there's a little bit of concern about that if we only penalize the emission from incinerators, then maybe some of the waste would move back to landfills. But I will talk about it also a little bit later. So just quickly, so why is waste burning the most relevant for the carbon markets? First of all, I mean, it's really one of the activities that has been growing a lot over the last few years. So when it comes to the mixed waste, also called residual waste, and most of it in Europe is incinerated, and some is still landfilled. But the thing for the incinerators is that the emissions are very easy to measure. So because they have this CO2 is coming out from the stack, and it can be easily measured. It's already happening for similar facilities, for example, for co-incinerators, such as co-incineration and cement plants. They are already included in the emission trading scheme, and they are already measuring by using a C14 method, which basically allows you to distinguish between the young carbon and the old carbon. And also the monitoring of emissions is, as I said, is already happening in many places because, for example, in several places, like in Sweden, UK, Netherlands, they have already carbon pricing, and we know how to measure emissions. And another one is that we know that it will have a big impact because the waste which is incinerated or even landfilled to large fraction is recyclable, and having a carbon price will deliver waste prevention and recycling. So we did a study with C Delft. It's a research institute in the Netherlands, and they found in short term the emission savings would be from 4 to 7 millions because things take time. And in the long term, actually, the cuts could be really, really high. So we are talking about between 18 to 32 million tons. And it also depends on if we are talking about only fossil emissions or we are also talking about the biogenic emissions. From my perspective, I think we should be ideally including both. But the reality is that we are still talking only about fossil emissions. The study also found that not only it will help to mitigate climate change, but it will also create jobs, and the cost impact of including incinerators, because it will significantly increase the cost of burning waste, so roughly by a half. This can be actually mitigated, so the revenues that are received from the CO2 pricing could be actually reinvested into better waste management. And there was actually a study done by Suez, which found that roughly half of this cost could be mitigated by waste management activities, which are very low hanging to implement, such as, for example, DRS and having a door-to-door collection and so on. Very quickly, just about the landfills before I finish, because obviously I mentioned this is one of the kind of like a pending points also for the European Commission, because there is a little bit of concern that ETS inclusion would also lead to more landfilling. I personally don't share that concern because we have a lot already in place. We have a 10% target. So whatever waste is generated, only 10% could be landfilled, but there are also some other tools I will just mention briefly. But the reason why landfills cannot be included under the ETS is that it's methodologically, it's very difficult to measure those emissions. And I think very recently the UK has kind of revised its emissions from landfills because they expected that they were capturing much more methane from landfills. But in reality, the emissions from methanes, they are very sporadic. So one day you might have one spot and another day another spot. And also the emissions, they are not coming directly what you landfill today, because what you landfill, for example, a few years back, they might be still producing some methane. So it's very difficult to really properly know and price those emissions. And therefore, yeah, it's ETS perhaps is not the best place. But so what to do instead? Because we do want to also reduce emission from incinerators, and like one of the things which already exists in the EU law is to require treatment. So basically, stabilize the waste biologically, ideally, before landfilling, so it does not produce more methane. And there is also ongoing work on developing standards for managing landfills, where they will also look into the methane. And then also, of course, taxes. And ideally, this would be differentiated between what is stabilized and versus unstabilized. I just wanted to say that something very interesting also happening right now is that the Environment Department of the European Commission, so-called DG Environment, is looking into developing cap and trade for landfills and potentially extending it to all residual waste. This would not look at greenhouse gas emissions, but the tonnages that are landfilled there. So it's very interesting, and we just published a report today together with the Reloop. Please check it out, and I'll stop here. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Yannick, for these insights. The two resources you shared, if you can also share the links to them in the chat. So the RUST report on including EU ETS, incineration in EU ETS, and also this recent one that was just published today, right? So great. It looks like, yeah, EU ETS, including waste incineration, will increase the cost of incineration, therefore encourage other solutions such as recycling and even there are some interesting questions already in the chat. We'll come back to them. In the same time, the revenues should be going to those circular solutions. So it's a double, let's say, synergy. So thanks. This is the European perspective. Now I would like to ask Zainab, our panelist. Thanks for having you here. So that represents the Global South. You've been representing Global South at different COPs already for some years, and you are, you will tell us about climate justice of this approach, cap and trade, cap and share, and how it can impact also the Global South. So you have a slide, if you can just put it into a presentation mode so we can better see it. So yes, Zainab from Equal Rights, based out of Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Poetry. Thank you so much, Poetry. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here. And thank you, Andrea, for inviting us. So I am Zainab B, based in Delhi, India, and working here with Equal Right. At Equal Right, we go by the belief that each and every person in this world deserves an equal right to the world resources and wealth. So we basically advance climate justice, equity, and human rights through universal basic income and unconditional cash transfers. We've been researching, advocating, and implementing projects globally, including Asia Pacific, Africa region, and South America. So here I will be focusing on a model that we have been working on for years called cap and share. So the cap and share model has 4 elements, and I will be touching upon widely while letting Andrea focus more on on its impact and how it can be utilized in the waste management sector. So talking about cap and share, it has 4 elements, very different from what we have been hearing about cap and trade. Cap and share is about legally binding caps, cap on the maximum amount of fossil fuel that can be extracted, that can be agreed on the basic carbon budget. Each country would get a per capita share of the carbon budget, which will be their national allowance. And countries would issue licenses to fossil fuel companies for every ton of carbon dioxide they extract, not emit, but what they extract or import. And these caps would be legally binding, unlike the cap and trade model, with penalties for exceeding it. So what we are trying to do with the cap and share model is to bring in a more justice-oriented lens. The second element of cap and share will be talking about the charge. So we'll be charging the fossil fuel companies would purchase licenses for every ton of carbon dioxide they extract or import. And every country would have a minimum price floor for selling its licenses. And we've been suggesting a variable price floor for each country based on their gross national income and climate vulnerability. The next two elements of cap and share is the fund part. So the idea is to develop a global commons fund, which will be democratically owned and would be established to receive the revenue from this charge. And each of this portion a portion of the GCF, the Global Commons Fund, could be invested in the Green New Deal or could be invested for other climate grants, for mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage. But a larger portion of it would be given back to the people as citizen dividends in the form of universal basic income. So here the idea is to make sure that the burden of this transition is not borne by those at the bottom and the households. So talking about the waste management sector and the overall industry, if you see the EU ETS system or national schemes, they should include waste incineration, but how do we think about collecting their revenues and using as a reparation model, as a tool for redistribution? So why I'm sharing about about climate justice and cap and share here is as though it's a wider model. How can we use it as a guiding principle in various industries? For example, in the waste management industries, which Andrea will be discussing furthermore, about how those responsible for the emissions pay and those affected actually receive the compensation for it. So, for example, if we implement it in the waste sector, incineration and high emission operations face a carbon price. Municipalities are incentivized to move rapidly towards more prevention, reuse, and sorting and recycling. And the households who should not be impacted by this transition or the carbon price, especially the low income ones, receive the revenue back in the form of a compensation or in the form of a citizen's dividend. And the communities are not punished for all the structural failures that exist in the waste management system. So, talking about the global perspective, especially coming from Global South, we feel that carbon pricing cannot be introduced without thinking about justice, or else it will become regressive. It increases energy poverty, it increases the waste fees, as well as the cost of living. So, here, cap and share could be seen as a model for bringing in a justice oriented lens to the carbon pricing system so that transition costs are not borne by the poor households. Informal workers are protected, and local governments have the resources to invest in more green based systems. And talking about our work at Equal Right, we've been looking at the role of cash transfers. What role can cash transfers play, and what could be the impact of money and finances flowing back to the people? We have seen that with such radical systems implemented, households adapt better to the climate crisis, adapt better to different waste management system, and adapt better to the transition that we are trying to work on. And vulnerable groups have actually regained the agency to be able to adapt to the crisis or prepare better. Then workers are protected during these kinds of transitions, and most importantly, we give power back to the communities. So these are the models and these are the ideas that we have been working on for a while. I'll also be sharing this presentation on the chat, and I'll leave it to Andrea to discuss the waste management and how cap and share could be implemented in that space better. Thank you very much.
Dhanyavad, Zainab, thank you very much. Really, so I haven't seen this presentation before, and I was like, wow, I buy this. I buy this. If I would be a decision maker, it is very well thought through. As an economist, you are. And also, you actually replied some of the questions that I could anticipate regarding social justice. And just transition, in fact, and how this mechanism could really address different problems here. So it was more general, not really on waste management. Now we will hear from Andrea that translates this model into waste management. Andrea is from Humans, and Andrea is based out of Italy, Florence. So Andrea, please over to you, and then we tune to some questions and answers, and also a poll. Don't forget, we have a poll for you to see how you maybe changed your idea about the carbon pricing after hearing those three presentations. Andrea, please, over to you. Prego.
Okay, let me know if you can see the slides. This should be in presentation mode.
Yeah.
Okay, I will be very quick. Humans is a pan-European movement for of citizens' initiatives for climate and democracy. And in particular, we have a position paper and a study about how to move the cap and share approach to the European context. And also, what does it mean to make a carbon pricing on waste socially fair, socially just? Practically, we have a goal, and it's clear for everyone. We have to reduce the CO2 emissions and making polluters pay, including incinerators, hopefully. And that is what Europe is already doing with the ETS. Of course, the inclusion of the incineration in the ETS one is really needed to promote circularity. We have a challenge in the short term for any sector that is taxed by CO2 emission pricing. We have to expect a price increase for most of the products, and in the case of waste sector, the service of the waste management company. Because if incinerators will be taxed for their CO2 emissions, then probably the waste treatment fee will be increased. And the same is taking place for any sector, and I will show later on. So what is the solution? We have new revenues from any carbon pricing systems, which are a lot. Taxing CO2 in the steel sector, in the fuel sector, in the energy sector means that any country, any member state in Europe received billions revenues annually. So the proposal is, let's reuse the revenues for protecting vulnerable citizens so that they can support the transition. Because otherwise, any climate policy has the result that it is really heavy for those that are receiving less money because they are poorer and they suffer more. Some data. The potential revenues by the ETS system without the incineration in 2030 is estimated about 200 billion euro. At the same time, we have to consider that 71 million of EU citizens, which is about 16% of the population, are at risk of poverty. And if you see some data here, fertilizers increase their price of 30%. How can a small farmer support the transition? If the steel is gonna cost 34% more, my car will cost more. Anything will cost more. If the concrete will increase its cost of 63%, do we have an idea on how housing will be more expensive? How these 71 million citizens can afford to support the transition without a policy that protects them? And it's not only poverty, it's about all of them at the end. So what is the proposal? This is an example. We have a traditional fiscal system where we have, I'm trying to explain, but it's quite easy. We have production with CO2 emission and a company that is producing a product, which is the product, emits CO2 emission, but the company pays taxes directly on its revenues to the government. Then the company pays the citizens, the employees, they get a salary, but over their salary, they pay taxes to the government. But then if we make the company paying CO2 taxes to the government, we can decrease the tax burden on labor so that the citizens, the employees, can get more money. And this can be applied not to all of them, but to the technicians, to the employees. They have salaries which are lower than others. We have to help them supporting the transition. And this is the way that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope this approach is clear. The same can be applied to everything, because these citizens nowadays, in addition to paying taxes to the government, they have to pay for the waste they produce. They have a waste tax. In Italy, where I come from, we have a very high waste tax. So what if this waste tax will increase because of the CO2 payment in the incineration sector? If a citizen pay now 300 euro per year, and it will have to pay 350, 400 in the next years, that can be affordable if the salary is high. It can be bad, very bad, if the salary is low. An additional point, Europe is now thinking about a second ETS, a second carbon pricing on household heating and on transportation. That means that the same citizens will have to pay more also for heating the house and for moving by car. We have to protect these citizens, and the only way we have is to share the revenues. That's why cap and share to citizens, from CO2 to citizens. So what is the call for action, the call to action for Europe that Humans is proposing together with Equal Rights, a EU budget for a socially just transition? We are aware that in Europe has thought about a social climate fund exactly doing that. But so far, this social climate fund is not enough, because it's created to be using only a reduced part of the budget from carbon pricing, very small, which is not enough to support low-income households. We need to dedicate these citizens a larger budget, because they are those suffering from the climate policy. And then a second, the global warming is global. Europe is covering few percentages of the CO2 emission, the global CO2 emission. So we have to promote a global agreement on carbon pricing. And the best way we have is to transport the EU model outside, making non-European countries coming in the EU ETS system. This is feasible. This is feasible, and we have to work for it. Thank you so much. I hope everything was quite clear for
Yes, grazie, Andrea. It was very clear. Thank you so much. Yes. Well, it was quite EU-oriented, but the approach is really replicable. I think that if the EU, and I hope the Commission is also joining here, I saw European Parliament people are here. This webinar is anyway recorded and will be shared widely so that it reaches the European Commission exactly about your calls and your work with Zainab at the COP and all global events also. Again, the idea is really good. I see also, yeah, you mentioned a few things that really stick to me is the polluter pays principle. Yeah, if you emit CO2, it's just normal, you have to pay for it. But it's important is that not regular citizens will pay all this. In fact, you also introduced the tax shift, which is reduction of the labor costs, but completing those taxes by the CO2 carbon pricing. So if the labor taxes are lower, then everyone is happy because the net salary will just increase. Sounds great. I know there are probably some caveats also, and there were some questions here also. We'll come back to them. Before that, we have a short poll. Akanshka, if you can just hang the poll here, and please, everyone, you can reply. The question is very simple. After hearing all this, is the carbon market relevant for the waste sector? Yes, only for some waste activities, or not at all? 1 minute for you to choose your option, your opinion. Great participation today. Over 100 colleagues, experts, and people interested. Some names are quite familiar to us. So hello to those of you. Great to see you here. After the poll, we'll discuss. So still 65 persons took part in the poll. Let's wait for 10 more seconds. Your last chance. Okay, Akanksha, can we, 67, can we stop now and just show the results? I think everyone see the results now? Yes. Okay, thank you. First of all, panelists, you did well. You convinced that including waste sector and especially waste incineration is relevant. Some people still think that only some activities are relevant to be covered by carbon pricing. Only few people said that not at all. This is also interesting to know, and why. If those people who say not at all, please mention your reasoning in the chat. Great, thanks. So I also wanted to just come back to Zainab. It's really so reassuring that this is well thought through mechanism. Cap, charge, fund, and share. Cap. So no matter how much money you have as an industry, you still cap your emissions. Yeah. If you could pay for all the emissions, that doesn't matter. You still have to cap. So that's really, really very powerful, I think. Charge, polluter pays principle. Fund. So there were questions and some comments also in the chat that, yes, we have prevention measures. They are underfunded. We are composting. It is underfunded. We have black soldier fly. It is underfunded. So here it is how we can find funding finally for that. Not only EPR fees, but also other streams need funding. Okay, let's move to some questions and answers. I couldn't really see all of them, and I didn't make prioritization. So I just ask three of you, please pick up any question you saw, and if you want to reply quickly, I will also monitor if there are some unanswered questions. Who would like to start? Yeah, Janek, go ahead.
Yes. So there was a question on where somebody was commenting really that saying that the price signal or ETS is not really working on incinerators. And indeed, this is something it's coming up quite a lot. And I just really wanted to explain that. And if you look at, for example, the carbon markets and where they started. So the first ones were Denmark and Sweden. And yes and no. I mean, it doesn't work if the carbon price is very, very low. For the last decade, the carbon price was on 10, 15, 5 euros. So it doesn't have an impact because it was just incorporated, assimilated in the overheads of the operators. It didn't have an impact. But now that when we have a carbon pricing actually very high, so for example, in countries like Norway, they have it's more than 100 euro per ton of CO2, and also in Sweden and Denmark, now that the carbon price we are talking about 80, 85 euros per ton, things are really starting to move, and we see a lot happening. But of course, things take time. So it's not something that you put a carbon price and tomorrow you reduce. But we see a lot of, for example, one of the things that is happening in particular in Sweden, but in Norway also, they start sorting the waste before incineration to remove all the plastics, but also some other materials. This is happening because of the carbon pricing. So and there's a lot of interest for that in also in other places. So it is happening. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned over 100 euros now, or dollars, in some countries. But in your perspective, this is the trend that will be there for sure, that like the ETS or the carbon price will simply increase, that's for sure, or it's not sure?
Well, I mean, there is I think there was an agreement to have some kind of cap, like not to let it to go like 200, 300 euros per ton. So for sure it will be remain very high, so around 8 euros for sure. So and 80. That's what we need. That's what we need because we have calculated, for example, in order for encourage more sorting, more collection, the price needs to be at least 40 euros. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Okay. Because it's, they sell energy, they get the benefit from here and there, from the gate fees. And so if you really want to make the waste activities kind of more attractive, then the price needs to be quite higher.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So the fund will be created with those high prices. Zainab, maybe a question to you. You spoke about empowering communities actually to drive this, how they can tap from this funding. it's been said here in the chat that actually the funding goes elsewhere, goes into some budgets, general budgets. So how communities can, you know, reivindicate, demand the good direction of those funds? Thanks.
Yes, a very appropriate question. And this is, I think, where exactly we are focusing on the role of unconditional cash transfers. So we want to make sure that it is the communities that are benefited correctly and in as justly manner as possible, and giving money directly to them is the easiest way to do it. So it depends on the way how we're using the collected funds from the carbon pricing. And one way is to figure out various ways on thinking about cash grants, cash transfers, or other ways. Universal basic income is there as well. So the idea is, how do we use the money and directly give it to the citizens? Some regions call it as the citizen dividend, wherein the money is equally distributed among the people unconditionally, regardless of any means testing. So this is what we are also focusing on and advocating as part of cap and share, and that is why it isn't cap and trade, it is cap and share. So the share element largely basically talks about how the communities are part of the solution and the communities are directly given the money and let them choose on what is best for them. Yeah.
Thanks, Zana. But practically, how citizens associations or NGOs like yours, yeah, grassroots movements can actually really make their voice up there? Huh?
Yeah, one way is to look at how we can basically advocate for unconditional cash transfers at the government level, and through that, one way could be to come up with more evidences for how unconditional cash transfers can be beneficial for communities. There have been several pilot projects going on. There have been a very successful pilot project going on in India as well that has been collecting evidences on how unconditional cash transfers can be beneficial. And this is where I think equal rights role come into play, wherein we are trying to advocate this at the larger global negotiation spaces during COPs. When there are negotiations going on for just transition, we've been trying to put in as much inputs to make sure that the community voices are heard, and we are trying to bring in such models in the negotiation space, but also at the national level. For example, our team in Latin America, one of our lead in Colombia is working to basically talk about basic income at the legislature level. So I think we have to work at various levels, at the international level, national level, but also build the evidences and do the community building as well to inform the larger decision making.
Thank you. Thank you. I love it. I love it. Andrea, all of you, your ideas are great. I come from a country that is Poland. These ideas would be immediately called as communist. You know, we are bad communists, so we are against business. How would you argue that is actually, you know, a good solution? It is just also pro-business. In fact,
well, yeah, this gives me the opportunity to also to answer to Lucy Stevens' questions in the chat. So how these models take in account the increased charge for emitters, which is an issue we are facing. First, we are talking about an existing system. Putting a price on carbon, it's already existing. It's not invented by us. So energy companies already pay for the CO2 emissions. The same is for steel companies. Now, the mitigation solution found by the European Commission to preserve the competitiveness of our industry is the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. So to preserve the competitiveness of our companies towards the world non-European companies and industries, we put a price on the border, which adjusts the cost of any good imported based on the CO2 emission for its production. However, this doesn't solve the problem that this product will cost more to the end user, to the citizen. So at the end, the main worrying aspect for a company, it's not to increase the price of a product, it's to have a reduced demand for that product due to the cost increase. If I sell something and I sell this bottle of water, if this bottle of water costs 10 euro, I'm afraid not because it costs 10 euro, but because no one will buy it. But if I give people the money to buy it, I'm fine. And if the system changes and I am a company that have to pay for CO2 emissions and then automatically to increase the price of its final product at the beginning, what I need is that citizens can buy the final product. So giving the money to citizens, it's not any communistic approach because we do not give the money to anyone. We give the money to those that need it. Because if we have a cost increase of any product, this will affect not all citizens equally. It will affect mainly those having reduced salaries. So we help them facing the transition. And by helping them, we help companies not losing the demand for their products. Because if we do not help, we are going to have a protest from citizens everywhere in Europe, and we have an economic system that can collapse.
We know the story. Thank you, Andrea. Yes, the Gilets jaunes. We know we don't want to repeat this. So the tax shift must go in parallel. Janek, how confident are you that this mechanism will actually really have an impact upstream? So on the design maybe of products, not only on the price of products, but on the design or redesign of products, delivery systems, and consumption.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, the impact also depends on what can be done. Increasing the price without changing the waste management activities sometimes is not very effective. So, for example, it would be important to have a pay-as-you-throw, so that generating waste will be more expensive. So we know that in countries, for example, when you combine separate collection with pay-as-you-throw, the separate collection rates they increase above 80%. So these are the things that you need to have, and certain things, of course, as I also mentioned, take time. So, for example, sorting is something because sorting facility also costs money, and so it will require making investment and then building the facility. But I mentioned that the Suez did a study on, because the UK wants to include the incinerators from 2028, and they found like it's actually really proven easy to implement waste management activities can be done in order to mitigate the costs and actually lower to avoid the costs being also passed to households.
So this is the Suez report you mentioned, that there are low-hanging or low-cost measures already that could be applied.
And proven measures. Yeah.
Which ones, for example?
I mean, it's having a door-to-door collection, having a TRS. We know the TRS works extremely well. The collection
TRS
rate
means deposit return.
Yes, sorry, thank you. It's exactly so. To having a deposit fee for example.
And composting.
Yes, composting also really low cost option again. So these are the methods, and could be easily done in order to avoid those costs being carried on to municipalities or households.
Thank you, Janek. Please continue your great work. And Andrea, and I wanted also to come back to Zainab if there was any aspect at the global level, again, to finish with you, because we are sometimes in the bubble here in the Europe, and we really have to hear the global South impact. And you mentioned good stories already in India happening. So would you like to have your last say?
I just wanted to lastly say that what could be implemented in Europe cannot be just copy pasted in any other global south country. We need to look at the context, even for the waste management industry or carbon pricing. The things here in global south, it gets much more difficult for the citizens, for the normal people who actually end up bearing the cost of any waste crisis or any waste management cost that increases. So how do we look at the context is something really important in our region, and how do we develop models that are more community oriented, more justice oriented is a question that I leave the audience with to keep on thinking for their work.
Thank you. And indeed, we have a global audience. Yes, one solution will not fit all, but this is, I would say, that the approach, no, to bring back the just transition and bring and address those distortions that have been created over the years, where wrong solutions have been supported while the good solutions were taxed, and labor has been too much taxed also. So that's the insight from Andrea. I think I'm not sure, Akanshka, shall we finish soon or we can continue? It's been 1 hour now.
Yeah, we can continue if you want to, complete and see if there are some relevant questions to be answered, the pending questions.
Okay, maybe one, let's say, principal question.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There was one question. So who is actually the polluter and emitter in this case? Is it waste to energy, waste incineration? Is it the consumer? Is it the producer of badly designed product? How, this definition, how to maneuver?
Can I answer for that?
Andrew,
Can I
please.
answer?
Andrea.
I think that there is a cultural problem that has been approached recently, the responsibility of a citizen. It's true that citizens have their own responsibility on their way of life and how many plastics they consume. However, this is partially true because citizens, they do not have the power to change the system. And for any decision that they take, they have usually to suffer some issues, because it's not say they can find every time sustainable products. Depends on where they are, and it's not say that sustainable products are cheap as the non-sustainable ones. So it's true that we have to train citizens about sustainable practices, but they are not those that they have to pay. The system, and so the main users of the system have to pay for it. And of course, even the companies, they can say they need time to turn green, but we are giving them the time by creating a new system where CO2 has a price and where citizens' taxation is redefined. But to me, it's the polluters that has to pay, and the polluters is the final emitter.
Okay, because then, so I like this. Thank you. This is the systemic approach. We are all zero waste. We try in our life, but the system sometimes does not allow us. And the just pricing has to be coming back, to maybe repair those distortions. So that's why I like the work of all three of you, which is very systemic, which is looking at solutions, anticipating the, let's say, caveats. And also, it is not just one solution fits all. It's really must be community-based. Governments, they have their independence to shape it in a way that is more appropriate for that society and geography. But the overall concept is now much better understood by me, and I hope by all the participants. This is where I would like to close. So thank you very much, Janek, Zainab, Andrea, and of course, Akanshka, and everyone for joining this. This webinar was recorded and will be shared on social media. And so you will see the slides as well. And this recording will also go to the decision makers, because yes, this is part of the systemic also advocacy. Thank you very much. Akanshka, over to you.
Thanks, Piotr. And as you said, this will be recorded and will be uploaded on our YouTube channel and on our website. And I thank the panel today for taking time out and sharing such, immense knowledge and experience on this topic and valuable insights. And obviously, the links that has been shared with the audiences, I'm sure they're able to understand and get their references from. We will pass on the pending questions to the panel as well. And if you like to stay updated on our future events, then please subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media. Thank you so much to the panel and to the attendees. Good day to all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.